The message came to Earth at 3 in the morning, transmitted through a device that had been silent for 500 years. The signal activated deep beneath the United Nations headquarters in New York City, in a vault that very few people even knew existed. When the computer screens lit up with ancient code, the duty officer nearly fell from his chair in shock. Commander Kang Tae-o arrived at the command center within 30 minutes. His dark eyes scanned the message again and again, trying to understand what he was seeing. The words were old, translated from languages that humans had studied for centuries. They were also impossible to misunderstand. "The obligation is called due," the message read. "Humanity, we need you." Kang sat down slowly. Around him, officers and technicians moved with quiet urgency, running checks on the signal to confirm it was real. It was. The encryption matched the ancient protocols that had been passed down through human leadership for 5 centuries. This message had come from the Galactic Council, the organization that had first found humanity and decided they were not ready for the stars. 500 years earlier, in what humans now called the First Contact, a human exploration ship had been discovered by the Valorians, a species of beings made from living crystal. The Valorians were not hostile, but they were also not welcoming. They had looked at humanity with the way an adult looks at a young child trying to play an adult game. Humans fought each other. Humans destroyed their own world. Humans made decisions based on emotions rather than logic. The Valorians had brought humanity's case before the Galactic Council, the meeting place of all intelligent species in this region of space. Some council members had wanted to destroy humanity as a threat. Others had wanted to change humanity, to fix what they saw as broken in human nature. But one voice had risen above the others. Captain Park Mi-sun, the commander of that first human ship, had done something no one expected. She had negotiated. She had stood before the council and spoke of human potential, human creativity, and human determination. She had made a deal. Earth would be left alone. Humans would not be interfered with. They would be given 500 years to develop in peace. In exchange, humanity would accept one obligation. If the Galactic Council ever needed aid, humans would answer that call. No questions asked. No negotiation. Total commitment. The Council had agreed, mostly because they found the whole idea amusing. Humanity would never be powerful enough to matter. The obligation would never be called in. But they had been wrong. Kang pulled up the reports that had come with the initial message. The images were disturbing. Entire star systems burning. Worlds covered in alien warships. The Valorians' beautiful crystal cities lay in ruins. The insectoid species called the Kethni, who had once been peaceful traders, had somehow unified under a single consciousness. They called themselves the Kethni Dominion, and they were consuming the galaxy like a disease. The Council was falling. Species that had existed for thousands of years were being wiped out. The defensive networks that had kept peace for millennia were breaking apart. And now, at last, the survivors remembered Earth. They remembered the promise. Kang thought about what this meant. Humanity had prepared for this moment for 500 years, though the wider galaxy had no idea. Behind the scenes, in labs and military stations hidden from alien sight, humans had been working, studying, building, getting ready for the day when the stars called for help. The young commander moved to the window and looked out at Earth below. Cities full of lights, billions of people living their lives, unaware that everything might be about to change. Some of them would be asked to fight for people they had never met. Some would die for a species they did not know. But that was the obligation. That was the promise that Park Mi-sun had made 500 years ago. Kang turned back to his officers. His face was calm. But his mind was already thinking through the steps that needed to happen. First, he needed to inform the global government. Then, the military response team needed to be activated. The weapons that had been secretly developed over centuries needed to be brought online. The soldiers who had been trained for this moment needed to be called to duty. "Get me a connection to the world government," Kang said quietly. "And prepare the first response fleet. Tell them to begin launch preparations immediately." One of the officers, a woman named Lieutenant Choi Yu-na, spoke up. "Commander, do we have the authority to do this without full government approval? 500 years is a long time. The documents from the old contact might not even be—" "They are real," Kang interrupted, but not unkindly. "I have seen the verification codes myself. And yes, there is a system in place. When the old beacon activates, it automatically alerts the emergency government authority. The decision to answer the call has already been made. We are simply following the protocol that was established before any of us were born." The connection to the world government came through quickly. Images appeared on the screens showing Prime Minister Jin Hai-sung in his office. He looked tired, as if he had also just woken up. Behind him, other government leaders were gathering, moving like people in a dream. "Commander Kang," Jin said, his voice steady despite the obvious shock he felt. "Tell me everything you know about this situation and tell me what you recommend." Kang explained the situation. He told them about the Kethni Dominion and its invasion. He showed them the images of destroyed worlds. He talked about the 500-year obligation that was now being called. "The Galactic Council asks that we send military forces to help them defend against this invasion," Kang said. "According to the agreement made by Captain Park, my son, we are obligated to respond fully and without reservation." The Prime Minister listened to everything. When Kang finished, Jin was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that would change human history. "How many soldiers can you send?" "I can have 10,000 ready to deploy within 1 week," Kang answered. "After that, I can send tens of thousands more. We have been preparing for this moment for a long time, Prime Minister. We are ready." Jin nodded slowly. "Then you have authorization to proceed with full mobilization. Send the message to the Galactic Council. Tell them that Earth remembers its promise. Tell them that humanity is coming." The Prime Minister paused, then added, "And Commander, tell them that they have no idea what they have asked for. They left us alone for 500 years. They have no idea what humans can do when we are given time to prepare." The connection ended. Kang looked at his officers. There was no celebration, no cheering. They all understood the weight of what was about to happen. Earth was about to enter the galaxy as warriors. Some of them would not come home, but the obligation had to be repaid. Kang sent the response message through the ancient beacon. "Earth answers the call. The Deathworlders are coming." Within hours, across every human nation and military base on Earth, alarms began to sound. Ships that had been sitting quietly in orbital docks suddenly came to life. Soldiers who had been waiting for this call, their entire careers began moving into position. The species that had been forgotten by the galaxy was about to remind everyone what they were capable of. In the darkness of space above Earth, the first ships began to rise toward the stars. The obligation, made 500 years before, was finally coming due. And the Galactic Council, in their desperation, was about to learn why they should have feared humanity all along. Captain Lee Jury stood in the massive hangar bay of the orbital station, watching as technicians made final preparations to the fleet. The Sol Rising, the flagship of humanity's first response squadron, was the largest and most advanced military ship Earth had ever built. Around it, dozens of other vessels floated in the empty darkness of space, each one a product of 500 years of secret preparation. Lee was a woman with sharp features and sharper eyes. She had studied military strategy since childhood, trained by teachers who were themselves chosen from humanity's greatest tactical minds. Every fiber of her being was designed for this moment, though the wider world had never known it. Her official title had been Research Coordinator for a scientific think tank. In reality, she had been commanding humanity's secret military development program. She moved through the hangar, inspecting each ship. The design was nothing like the sleek, elegant vessels that alien species built. These ships looked almost crude by comparison, with exposed weapon systems and reinforced hulls. But that was intentional. Lee's engineers had not tried to copy alien design. Instead, they had built based on what worked best for human technology and human tactics. "How long until we can engage the enemy?" Lee asked her chief engineer, Park Min-ho, a man whose hands always seemed to have grease under the fingernails and whose mind worked like the most precise machine. "The adaptive weapon systems are still being calibrated," Park replied. "But we should be ready for full deployment within 2 hours. The AI cores have been trained on 10,000 battle scenarios. They are as ready as they will ever be." Lee nodded. The weapon systems were one of humanity's greatest secrets. They were not static. As a battle progressed, the ship's computer systems would learn from the enemy's attacks and automatically adjust strategy. It was something no alien species had ever managed to develop. The Council species believed that weapons should be simple, reliable, and unchanging. They could not understand the concept of equipment that learned and adapted. That was about to become very expensive knowledge. Major Park Hae-il approached, moving with the confident stride of a soldier who had trained his entire life for war. He was tall and broad, with a scarred face that showed he had seen real combat before. Unlike most of the military officers, Park had experience. He had fought against raiders and pirates on the edge of known space, always keeping his distance from Council observation. "The weapons are ready," Park said. "We have missiles that can destroy a Kethni warship in a single strike. We have EMP weapons that can disable their communication systems. We have plasma cannons that can burn through armor that the Council thought was indestructible. But, Captain, we are still massively outnumbered. The Kethni Dominion has millions of ships." "But we are not fighting millions," Lee said calmly. "We are fighting a collective consciousness. That is their weakness." She pulled up a holographic display showing what her team had learned about the Kethni. They were an insectoid species with hive minds that were all connected to a central intelligence. Individual Kethni had no ability to make decisions. Everything had to go through the hive network. "The Kethni can overwhelm us with numbers," Lee explained, "but they cannot surprise us. They cannot improvise. They cannot adapt to unexpected situations as quickly as humans can. When the hive gives orders, it takes time for those orders to be understood and spread to the front lines. We will be 3 steps ahead of them every time." Park studied the display, and then a small smile appeared on his scarred face. "You are going to bleed them." "Exactly," Lee confirmed. "We will move fast. We will strike where they are weak. We will run when they try to corner us. We will make them chase us until their resources run out. The Kethni do not know how to fight an enemy that does not follow the rules they understand." In another part of the station, Dr. Choi Nari was studying everything known about alien psychology. She was a small woman, with an intensity that could make much larger people uncomfortable. Her eyes rarely seemed to blink, and her mind worked at a speed that even the station's AI systems sometimes struggled to keep up with. Choi had spent her career studying why species made the choices they made. She understood the Valorians' love of logic and order. She understood the Kethni's need for unified consciousness. And she understood something that most scholars in the galaxy missed. Humans were unique in their ability to hold contradictions in their minds. Humans could be logical and emotional. They could be individual and collective. They could be peaceful and savage. They could break their own rules when survival demanded it. This flexibility, this strange ability to be multiple things at once, was what made humans so dangerous. "When we meet the Kethni," Choi said to her team, "they will not know what they are facing. They will see our ships and assume we are just another council species, slightly more advanced than usual. They will be wrong. We do not think like them. We do not fight like them. We do not surrender like them. Major Han Dong-jun stood in the shadow of the station, listening to the soldiers being trained for infiltration operations. These men and women were different from the regular military personnel. They had been trained to think creatively, to break rules when necessary, to make decisions without waiting for orders. Han was a lean man with quick eyes that missed nothing. He had grown up on the edge of human space, in the settlements where human traders met with alien merchants and adventurers. He understood alien culture in ways that most people did not. He knew how to move through alien spaces without being noticed. He knew how to blend in, to observe, to strike when the time was right. His team would not be taking part in the big space battles. Instead, they would be infiltrating Kethni installations, discovering weaknesses, sabotaging equipment, and generally creating chaos from the inside. They would be humanity's knife in the dark. Remember, Han told his soldiers, the Kethni believe that chaos is bad. They believe that a unified plan is always better than improvisation. We are going to show them that they are wrong. When you are inside an enemy installation, you are not following a rigid plan. You are adapting to what you find. You are making decisions. You are becoming something that the Kethni collective mind cannot understand. As the preparations continued, Commander Kang stood alone in the observation dome of the Sol Rising, looking out at Earth below. Blue water, green continents, white clouds. His world. The world that had produced a species the galaxy had chosen to ignore. The world that was about to teach the galaxy a lesson. Kang thought about all the people down there who had no idea what was about to happen. The children who would grow up in a galaxy forever changed. The families that would lose soldiers. The nations that would have to rebuild after their warriors returned from the stars. But he also knew that this was humanity's moment. For 500 years they had prepared in secret. For 500 years they had built weapons and trained soldiers and developed strategies. For 500 years they had waited for the day when the stars called for help. That day had come. Kang activated the communication system. His voice went out to every ship, every station, every soldier preparing for deployment. "This is Commander Kang Tae-o," he said. "In a few hours, we will leave Earth and join the battle that is destroying the galaxy. We will be outnumbered. We will face enemies we have never fought before. Some of you will not come home. But this is our obligation. 500 years ago, Captain Park Mi-sun made a promise to the Galactic Council. Today, we keep that promise." He paused, then continued with intensity in his voice. "The Galactic Council looks at us and sees a primitive species that somehow became useful. They are wrong. We are not primitive. We are human. And today the galaxy will learn what that means." The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, human soldiers across the orbital stations and ships took a moment to understand what was coming. Then, with quiet determination, they returned to their work. Humanity was ready. The Deathworlders were coming to war. The Kethni did not notice the distortion in space until it was too late. One moment, there was empty vacuum near the Valorian homeworld. The next moment, a fleet of 100 human ships materialized as if they had simply decided to exist in that location. The insectoid war machines processed this information through their collective mind. The response was automatic and dismissive. These ships were small. Their design was primitive. They would be destroyed like all the other Council species that had tried to resist the Dominion. Commander Kang stood in the command center of the Sol Rising, watching the sensor displays as they filled with Kethni contacts. Over 15,000 enemy ships. The ratio was impossible. Any military strategist in the galaxy would have declared the human force already defeated, but Kang was not any military strategist. He was human. "Send the message," he ordered. Lee Ju-ri's voice came through the communication system, calm and clear. "All ships, this is Captain Lee Ju-ri. Stand by for engagement orders. Remember your training. Remember that the Kethni are not individuals. They are a collective. We are going to teach them what it means to face a species that thinks like we do. Kang transmitted to all Kethni frequencies. This is Earth Defense Force, First Response Squadron. Stand down your weapons, surrender, and you will be processed according to galactic law. Refuse, and you will be eliminated. The response came in a sound like a million insect voices speaking as one. It was laughter, cold, mechanical, and utterly confident. The Kethni believed they were so superior that the human threat was actually entertaining. "Release the hunter drones," Lee commanded. From every human ship, weapons bay doors opened. 2,000 microfighters launched into space, each one the size of a small building, but as agile as a bird. These were not heavy warships. They were fast, maneuverable, and equipped with adaptive AI that could learn and change tactics within seconds. The Kethni responded by launching their own fighters. 17,000 insectoid attack craft descended toward the human fleet in a perfect geometric pattern that had proven devastating against every other species in the galaxy. The hive mind was confident. The pattern was perfect. The outcome was predetermined. Lee watched the enemy swarm approaching on her displays. To another commander, it would have looked like certain death. To her, it looked like opportunity. "All fighter squadrons, implement Pattern 3, she commanded. The human fighters did something that no Kethni collective had ever seen. Instead of forming defensive formations like other species did, the human fighters scattered. They broke apart into small groups that split apart further. They seemed to attack without organization, without structure, without any unified plan. It was exactly the kind of chaos that the Kethni hive mind could not process. When the two forces met, something remarkable happened. The Kethni fighters moved with perfect synchronization. They attacked with absolute precision, and they were completely ineffective. The human fighters moved in ways that made no logical sense. They twisted into paths that should have resulted in collisions but somehow avoided them. They attacked from angles that conventional military doctrine said were wrong. They withdrew when they should have advanced, and advanced when they should have withdrawn. The AI systems in each human fighter were learning. They watched what the enemy did. They predicted what the enemy would do next. They found the patterns in the Kethni movements and exploited those patterns. Within minutes, the first 100 Kethni fighters exploded in the vacuum. Major Park Hye-il monitored the battle from the Sol Rising's weapons control station. "Captain Lee, our drones are confirming enemy fighter losses. Estimate 340 Kethni craft destroyed. No friendly losses." Lee was already adjusting tactics. "Push forward. Engage their capital ships. Have the heavy weapons target their cruisers. Keep the drones harassing their formations. Do not let them establish any organized defense." The human fleet moved forward, and as they moved, something incredible happened. The Kethni, for the first time in the history of their conquest, began to lose. At the same time, Major Han Dong-jun's infiltration teams were moving into position. 3 stealth shuttles approached the outer defense stations that protected the Valorian system. These were not going to be frontal assaults. Instead, Han's soldiers would use their favorite weapon, deception. Lieutenant Park Soo-jin was a xenotechnology specialist with fingers that could manipulate alien equipment as if she had been born to it. She worked on her computer, creating a virus that would spread through the Kethni communication network. It was not designed to shut down the entire system. Instead, it would introduce tiny delays. It would corrupt a fraction of the messages. It would make the hive mind just a little less coordinated. A fraction of delay, a tiny amount of corruption. But in a battle where everything depended on perfect synchronization, those tiny problems became fatal. Han's team infiltrated the first station through a maintenance airlock that the Kethni had never imagined would be used. They moved quietly through the station, avoiding detection, until they reached the communication hub. Park Soo-jin inserted a small device into the computer network. The virus spread like fire through water. Above the Valorian system, the Kethni fleet suddenly began moving with less precision. Orders took a fraction of a second longer to reach the front lines. Fighters found themselves slightly out of position. The perfect coordination that had made the Dominion so powerful began to fray. Lee saw the change immediately. "Now, all drones, push the assault. This is our window." The human fleet engaged with everything they had. Missile storms descended on Kethni battlecruisers. EMP weapons disabled their weapon systems. The capital ships, without the ability to coordinate their defense, began to fall. The Kethni collective mind tried to respond. It tried to adapt. But adaptation required individual thinking, and individual thinking was forbidden in the hive. The collective could only send new orders, and by the time those orders reached the fleet, everything had already changed. After 30 minutes of combat, over 3,000 Kethni fighters lay in ruins, floating through space. The insectoid warships that had devastated 100 Council worlds were being torn apart by human tactics that they had no framework for understanding. The Kethni commander, if such a thing could be called a commander, when all Kethni were simply nodes in a vast network, made a decision that the collective had never made before. It retreated. The order went out to the fleet: pull back, regroup, fall back to secondary defensive positions. As the Kethni disengaged, Lee made a choice that showed why humanity had become the most feared species in this region of space. She did not let them retreat calmly. "All ships pursue," she commanded. "Do not let them establish a new line. Push them until they break." The human fleet, smaller and faster than the enemy, pursued the Kethni retreat. It was like watching a lion chase an elephant. The elephant was larger, stronger, more heavily armored. But the lion moved faster, fought with intelligence, and had learned 500 years of tactics specifically designed for hunting prey that was bigger than itself. When it was over, the Valorian homeworld was saved. The crystal beings looked up at the sky and saw a sight they had thought impossible: the Kethni Dominion retreating in defeat. One of the eldest Valorians, a being of crystal that had existed for 4,000 years, contacted Commander Kang. When the Valorian spoke, its voice seemed to resonate with something like surprise. "What manner of species are you?" the Valorian asked. "You fight as though battle is not an event you experience, but an art form you have perfected over generations." Kang, looking at the battle reports coming in from across the system, allowed himself a small smile. "We are human," he replied simply, "and we have been waiting 500 years for this moment." The victory at the Valorian homeworld was only the beginning. What came next was a campaign of such aggressive brilliance that historians would study it for thousands of years to come. Over the following months, Captain Lee Ju-ri's fleet did not simply defend Council worlds. They retook them. System after system fell back under human control. The Kethni Dominion, which had seemed unstoppable just weeks before, found itself constantly on the defensive. Every time they tried to establish a new defensive line, human forces would appear from an unexpected direction. Every supply convoy they sent was ambushed and destroyed by Major Han Dong-jun's infiltration teams. Every attempt to rebuild their fleet was disrupted by sabotage operations that seemed to appear from nowhere. The secret to humanity's success was not just military hardware or tactical brilliance. It was creativity. When a plan failed, human commanders did not wait for new orders from a distant command structure. They created new plans on the spot. When an enemy position seemed impenetrable, human soldiers found ways to penetrate it that no military academy had ever taught them. When resources ran low, human engineers improvised solutions from whatever materials they could find. The Kethni collective mind simply could not process this kind of unpredictable behavior. But victory came with a price that was written in human blood. The Battle of Kethny Station 7 was the largest space engagement of the entire campaign. Hundreds of thousands of ships engaged in combat across a volume of space larger than a planetary system. The battle lasted for 3 days and nights without pause. Humans died by the thousands, their names becoming entries in a growing memorial list. Among the dead was Major Park Hae-il. He had volunteered for the assault on the station's central weapons platform. The platform was heavily defended, protected by automated systems that had been designed to survive any attack. But Park had studied the specifications and found what others had missed. The power systems were vulnerable. Park led a team of elite soldiers directly at the heart of the enemy fortress. They fought through automated defenses that tried to tear them apart. They climbed through structures designed to kill them. They moved forward even as explosions rocked the platform around them. When they reached the power coupling, Park rigged explosives throughout the system. He made calculations that would ensure maximum damage. Then, because he understood the mathematics of destruction better than anyone alive, he triggered the charges. The platform exploded in a violent bloom of light and energy. The weapons that had been destroying human ships fell silent. But Major Park Hae-il did not escape that explosion. When Captain Lee Ju-ri received the notification that Park was dead, she did not weep. She did not scream. She simply absorbed the information and added it to the weight she was already carrying, the deaths of her soldiers. The weight of command, the knowledge that every decision she made cost lives. Instead of breaking, she used Park's death to sharpen her focus. Every tactic became more precise. Every strategy became more ruthless. Every decision to engage the enemy carried a new intensity, as if Lee was personally punishing the Kethny for taking one of her best soldiers. The Galactic Council watched humanity's campaign with growing understanding. They began to see that the species they had dismissed as primitive was actually something far more complex and far more dangerous. The Valorians, with their crystal minds and logical approach to problems, could not understand how humans made decisions. The process seemed chaotic, emotional, irrational, and yet the outcomes were consistently brilliant. A human commander would take an action that made no sense according to any known military doctrine, and somehow it would result in a decisive victory. The Council realized that they had made an error 500 years ago. They had not understood what Captain Park Misun had been telling them. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was different. Humans thought in ways that other species found incomprehensible. And in warfare, that difference was absolutely devastating. Dr. Choi Na-ri was brought into meetings with the Galactic Council. Her task was to help them understand human psychology and explain why humans were so effective at warfare. She would sit in those meetings, this small woman with intense eyes, and explain concepts that the Council struggled to grasp. Humans are not afraid to break rules, she told them. When a situation demands it, humans will abandon doctrine, tradition, and established procedures. We will do whatever works. That flexibility, that willingness to change, is what makes us dangerous. The council members seemed troubled by this explanation. The Valorians in particular struggled with the concept. Their entire civilization was built on logic and order. The idea of willingly breaking rules seemed fundamentally wrong to them. But do you not understand, Choi continued, that in warfare, the rigid species lose? You follow rules. The Kethny follow the dictates of their collective consciousness. Humans follow only the rule of survival. We will adapt. We will change. We will do whatever is necessary. As the months turned into a year, the Kethny Dominion was pushed further and further back toward its home system. More than 10,000 Kethny warships had been destroyed. Billions of insectoid soldiers had been killed or scattered. The unified consciousness that had made the Dominion so powerful was beginning to fracture. Human casualties were significant but manageable. Dozens of ships lost. Thousands of soldiers dead. entire squadrons of elite fighters eliminated in desperate battles. But humanity had learned something that the Kethni had never known: how to lose soldiers and continue fighting. On a starship orbiting one of the liberated worlds, Colonel Han Dong-jun, promoted to his new rank after Park's death, stood with his team and watched the sun rising over a destroyed planet. The world below had been ravaged by Kethni occupation. Cities had been obliterated. The population had been nearly wiped out. But the survivors were beginning to rebuild. "That is why we fight," one of his soldiers said quietly. Han nodded. "Not for glory, not for honor. We fight so that this world can rise again. We fight so that other worlds do not fall." Captain Lee Ju-ri studied new battle plans in her command center. The enemy was weakening. The final assault on the Kethni homeworld would happen soon. It would be the largest battle of the entire campaign. It would require every ship, every soldier, every ounce of human determination that they could muster. But Lee had learned something during this campaign that would stay with her forever. Humans were not the most powerful species in the galaxy by their strength. They were the most dangerous because of their will, because they would not break, because they would keep fighting long after other species had surrendered. In the darkness of space, the human fleet regrouped. Damaged ships were repaired. Wounded soldiers were healed. New supplies arrived from Earth. The great war machine of humanity prepared itself for one final terrible blow that would end the Kethni threat forever. And in those quiet moments before the final battle, every human soldier understood something fundamental. They had left Earth as a species answering an ancient obligation. They would return to Earth as the most feared warriors in the galaxy. The Deathworlders had arrived, and empires were falling. The Kethni homeworld was a massive planet shrouded in clouds of acidic atmosphere. In the ancient past, before the insectoids had unified under a collective consciousness, this world had been beautiful and full of diverse life. Now it was a fortress. The entire planet was fortified. Massive orbital stations surrounded it. Automated defense systems covered every approach. The Kethni Dominion had retreated to its birthplace to make its final stand. Commander Kang studied the defensive systems from the bridge of the Soul Rising. The numbers were daunting. 30,000 Kethni fighters defending the system, millions of automated defense guns, energy shields that could withstand planetary bombardment. If humanity tried a direct assault, they would lose most of their fleet. But Kang had learned something from watching Captain Lee Ju-ri operate. Sometimes the most direct approach was the least obvious one. "Get me Colonel Han," Kang commanded. Minutes later, the scarred face of Han Dong-jun appeared on the communication screen. He was on one of the smaller infiltration ships, stationed far from the main fleet. "I need you to do something that sounds impossible," Kang said without preamble. "We need to disable the planetary shields from the inside. Without those shields, our fleet can bombard the Kethni defense systems into ruins. But to do that, someone needs to get inside the planet and reach the shield generator." Han was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "How many soldiers can I take?" "You can take as many as you want," Kang replied. "But remember, you have to be stealthy. If the Kethni detect you, they will kill you all before you reach your objective." "Then I will take a small team," Han said. 6 soldiers. Myself makes 7. We will be fast enough to slip through their detection systems." Han spent the next hour selecting his team. Lieutenant Park Soo-jin, the xenotechnology specialist who had created the virus that had crippled the Kethni communication network. Sergeant Kim Min-soo, an expert infiltrator who could move through enemy territory without being seen. Corporal O.G. Won, an engineer who could handle explosives and sabotage. 3 others, each a master of their craft. They would infiltrate the Kethni home system, slip past the defenses, enter the planet's atmosphere, and somehow reach the shield generator buried deep underground. the chances of success were nearly zero. "Be careful," Kang told Han before the infiltration team departed. "If you die, this operation fails. If this operation fails, we lose everything." Han smiled, an expression that somehow remained confident even though he understood exactly what was being asked of him. "We will not die, Commander. We will succeed, because the alternative is unacceptable." The infiltration shuttle was a tiny craft designed to be invisible to enemy sensors. It moved slowly, carefully, through the Kethni defense network. Han and his team held their breath as they passed within meters of massive orbital stations. Automated weapon systems scanned the empty space, but found nothing. They entered the Kethni atmosphere like falling snow, unnoticed among billions of particles of debris and dust that floated in the air. On the planet below, they infiltrated a massive Kethni stronghold. The underground city was vast, stretching for kilometers beneath the surface. The insectoid soldiers moved through the corridors in perfect synchronization, following orders transmitted through their hive network, but they never saw the 7 humans moving through the shadows. Park Soo-jin broke the encryption on a Kethni computer terminal and began uploading a virus into their system. Not the same virus as before, but something new, something more aggressive. This virus would spread through every connected computer on the planet, corrupting data and creating cascades of system failures. Kim Min-soo led them deeper into the stronghold, finding routes through the Kethni structure that the insectoids themselves had forgotten about. Ancient passages, abandoned sections, tunnels that led to the heart of the installation. When they finally reached the shield generator chamber, they found it more heavily defended than they had expected. Automated systems, Kethni guards, weapons and traps designed to kill intruders. Oh Ji-won did something that no amount of training could have prepared her for. She looked at the defenses and simply started taking them apart. She moved with speed and precision, disabling alarms, destroying automated weapons, finding the weak points in the security system and exploiting them. When one of the automated defense systems activated and started firing at her, Oh Ji-won did not retreat. She advanced directly into the gunfire, calculating trajectories, finding the gaps, moving through the assault like a dancer who knew the steps to a deadly waltz. The other soldiers covered her, providing suppressing fire against the Kethni guards that tried to stop them. Sergeant Kim Min-soo took down 3 insectoid soldiers with martial arts movements that would have been impossible for a normal human. But humanity had been genetically enhanced for 500 years. Humans could move faster, hit harder, survive longer. Finally, they reached the shield generator itself. It was a massive structure, humming with energy, protecting the planet from orbital bombardment. Oh Ji-won looked at the structure and began placing explosives. She calculated the exact amount of force needed to destroy the system without triggering a catastrophic explosion that would kill them all. Her fingers moved with absolute precision, arranging detonators and explosive charges in patterns that made sense only to her enhanced mind. "We have 2 minutes," she announced. "Everyone to the exit tunnel, now." They ran. Behind them, the shield generator room began to collapse. The ground shook. Entire sections of the underground city began to come apart. They made it to their shuttle with seconds to spare. As the craft lifted off, the shield generator exploded in a massive cascade of energy and destruction. Above the planet, the shields fell. Captain Lee Ju-ri watched the notifications come through on her displays. The shields were down. The infiltration team had succeeded. She did not hesitate. "All ships, this is Captain Lee Ju-ri. Initiate full bombardment. Target everything on the surface. Give them everything we have." The human fleet, which had been holding position waiting for this moment, unleashed hell upon the Kethni homeworld. Thousands of missiles descended from the sky. Orbital bombardment platforms opened fire with weapons designed specifically to penetrate planetary defenses. The sky above the Kethni world turned into an inferno. The automated defense systems, without the shields to protect them, were obliterated. Kethni military installations were vaporized. The carefully constructed fortifications that had taken centuries to build were destroyed in hours. The Kethni collective consciousness began to fracture. For the first time in their history, individual Kethni began to feel things other than loyalty to the hive. Fear, confusion, the desire to survive as individuals rather than as parts of a greater whole. Landing craft descended to the planet's surface, carrying human soldiers to secure the conquest. There was fighting, brutal and intense, but it was over almost before it began. The Kethni, without the hive mind's coordination, could not fight effectively. Some tried to resist, most simply surrendered. Colonel Han Dong-jun led a mission to the central command center of the Kethni Dominion. There, in a chamber deep beneath the planet's surface, they found the source of the collective consciousness. A vast biological structure composed of billions of connected insectoid nodes, all linked together to create a single unified mind. "Destroy it," Han ordered. The chamber was sealed and flooded with atmosphere that the Kethni could not survive. The greatest hive mind in the galaxy was erased, not with a bang, but with the quiet finality of a locked door. With the destruction of the central consciousness, the Kethni Dominion ceased to exist as a military force. Millions of insectoids suddenly found themselves alone in their own minds for the first time in their evolutionary history. Some panicked, some wept, some simply sat down and tried to understand what it meant to be an individual. Commander Kang stood on the bridge of the Soul Rising, watching as the sensors reported the complete destruction of the Kethni military infrastructure. The war was over. Humanity had answered the ancient obligation, and in doing so they had changed the course of galactic history. The Kethni Dominion, which had seemed unstoppable, had been defeated by a species that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive. The Deathworlders had come, and empires had fallen.